So maybe you've been trying to figure out the next step in your life. Maybe you, like me, have made the pros and cons list and you've asked other people for their advice, and maybe you've done some research and you're trying to figure out where you should go next by doing a lot of thinking about it. And I know how this goes because I can get trapped in this also. I've found that all that thinking rarely leads me to any sort of an answer. Today, after going through so many life transitions and helping other people go through theirs, I now know that oftentimes all this thinking just keeps us stuck. Let me tell you why in this video today, because I have a better option for you that'll make it a lot easier for you to decide what step to take next. So here's what most people don't realize, and what I didn't realize for a long time, is that logic, which is what we're tapping into when we're doing all this thinking and the pros and cons list and the analyzing and the asking for advice. Logic can only build from what already exists. So it compares options, it weighs outcomes, and it looks for patterns in what is already familiar to us. And that's why it can work so well. When the path ahead of us is clear, or when we know what needs to happen, we can use logic to break down how we're going to go about making that thing happen. That typically works when we're trying to decide between known things we're already familiar with. But when you're in a life transition, the road ahead oftentimes isn't clear. If you're trying to figure out what step to take next and you don't know, logic is going to fail you, because logic likes to look at things that are known and familiar and compare and contrast and give you an answer that way. If you don't know where you're going next, logic is going to fail you. And that's oftentimes why all this endless thinking and analyzing and listing things just leaves you stuck. It just leaves you more frustrated. In this case, the next version of your life doesn't exist yet. It's somewhere in the unknown future, and logic just can't give you a map to a place that hasn't been created. Philosophers have even talked about this. L.A. Paul, for instance, talks about how when you're facing a truly life-changing choice, you can't know what the right answer is ahead of time, because you don't yet know the future version of yourself who will be living in that time. Which makes sense, right? A lot of times we don't think about it when we're going through a life transition, that it also involves an identity shift, because who we are in the life we are in now is going to be different than who we are in the next chapter of our lives. Let's say John is looking to make a career change. He's been a lawyer so far in his life, and he wants to do something entirely different. Well, his identity is really wrapped up in being a lawyer right now. Maybe he wants to work with teenage kids, but he's never done that before. Or he's only done it maybe here or there in these small capacities. So his identity is not as John who works with teenage kids. His identity is as John the lawyer. So he can't really see what the future version of that person might be like. He can sense it maybe a little bit. Maybe there's something that's leading him that direction, but he can't see it clearly. This is what this philosopher Paul was talking about, as far as we can't see this version of ourselves. And so it's very unclear what that next chapter should be, and all the thinking in the world isn't going to help him. Decision science research says something similar. When our information is limited, or the future looks ambiguous, we can't see it clearly, which of course we can't when we're contemplating the next chapter of our lives. Logical analysis starts to break down. What takes its place? Intuitive signals or experiential sensations become more useful in those situations. And this was shown in a study in 2022. So even science is showing that when we don't know the future, when it's very ambiguous to us, we can't see it clearly, that logic breaks down, that we have to rely on our other senses, which means intuition. Harvard researchers said it even more simply, that when data alone can't paint the full picture, intuition becomes critical to good judgment. So when you sit down to, quote, figure it out, which we all try to do, you're actually asking your brain or logic to do something that it's just not built for. You're kind of trying to force yourself to create a map to the unknown using logic, using thinking. And that's why you keep circling the same ideas. That's why you feel stuck. That's why you may be frustrated right now that you can't find this answer. And that's why it never quite seems certain to you what this next step should be that you want to take. This is not that you are indecisive. I mean, I've thought this in my past, that I must just be indecisive because I can't figure out what to do next. That's not the thing. It's that we're using the wrong tool to figure out what we need to do next. So then the question, of course, becomes, if logic doesn't work, what does? And we're talking about intuition, but what does that mean? Because that can be confusing. So many people mean different things when they say, just use your intuition. Am I looking for some sign to say, go this way, and that seems silly to me, or whatever? We can get into this place that just does not seem as clear-cut. And this is one of the reasons why we want to rely on logic and we want to rely on thinking, because that to us is clear. That to us is something perhaps we're more used to using. But But if this tool is not going to help us to figure out our next step, we want to figure out what the next step is. Okay, so we say intuition is the tool, but just saying trust your intuition, I mean, people say that sometimes like that's just going to hand you the regular answer. Like somehow if someone says, well, just trust your intuition, it's like, oh, well, I know what to do, right? Well, obviously it's not that simple. The intuition does not speak to us in the way that the logical mind does. So someone simply saying, well, trust your intuition typically doesn't help us because we're like, okay, well, I'm kind of feeling like maybe this is the thing, but I don't understand it clearly. So we end up in this frustrated place between wanting to have a clear answer and not having a clear answer and not knowing how to get it because we don't know how to get a clear answer from intuition, right? Okay, so if you've ever felt this way, you're not crazy. It could just be that, like me for so long, you're not quite sure how to use it. Think about logic, for instance. There are countless ways you can use it. You can analyze data. You can make mind maps. You can make pros and cons lists. You can set up charts and see the data in front of you. We need to think of logic as being a system with all these different entry points. There's many ways you can lead your brain and your thinking into a logical analysis of something. Okay, so let's think of intuition in the same way. Intuition is also a system. It's just a different type of system. So we have to have different entry points into this system to be able to use it to get clear answers. Maybe you've already tried to tune into your intuition. Maybe you're already trying to see what it's telling you about what needs to come next in your life. But maybe you're just getting confusing signals or you're not getting a clear answer. This is common as well. And this is another reason why somebody just saying, well, just trust your intuition can be so unhelpful. Because when you're in a life transition, something has happened that has made you feel like this is time for a change. And this could be something outside of yourself, like a lost job. Maybe you've lost someone important in your life. Maybe you've had to move. Maybe there's been a financial upset. Or maybe you're just feeling restless in your life and you know something needs to change and you're not sure what. When we're in that place, it is not usually a comfortable place to be. Because we're not sure what to do next, and indecision is always painful. This is psychologically proven. Indecision is painful. So if you're in this place, you're already dealing with stress and fear and indecision, which is painful, uncertainty, and this pressure to figure it all out. All of that noise tends to scramble the frequency and messes with the connection between you and your intuition. So even if you're someone who tunes into your intuition, if you're in a place like this, you may find that the connection is scratchy, that you can't hear what your intuition is trying to tell you. And this is why, because you're in a place where you're feeling stressed out and you're feeling fear and you're feeling uncertainty and anxiety. Because there are usually 3 reasons your intuition may feel out of touch right now. And once you understand these, it gets a lot easier to know how to reconnect. And after that, I'll walk you through a system that does help you access this part of your intelligence, even when your mind is spinning, even when you're feeling anxious and frustrated. So, reasons why your intuition may feel out of reach right now. Number 1, your intuition is recalibrating right now. The first reason that it may seem distant is because it's recalibrating its signal. Every major transition in your life rewrites your internal map. And this is what I didn't realize at all when I was going through transitions, because I've always been someone that wanted to rely on my intuition and would be frustrated when I couldn't access it or when the answer didn't seem to be coming to me. I never realized that the intuition, just like the rest of our system when we're in a life transition, is also recalibrating. It is also going through a change. If you think about who you are now and who you were 10 years ago, and you think about the difference, you kind of rewrote your internal map over the past 10 years. You probably didn't realize it, but if you compare the person you are today with the person you are 10 years ago, you can probably see where a lot of yourself has changed. Part of that is your internal self, which of course is your intuition. The instincts that you've used to guide you so far were tuned to an older version of you, your past environment, your past relationships, your past goals, and even your past identity. But when those things start shifting and you can sense a life change needs to happen, your intuition also needs time to adjust. You can think of it like a compass that's suddenly been moved. So it's still magnetic, it still knows to point to true north, but the poles have shifted because you've moved it to a different place. So it needs a minute to reorient itself. So it kind of wobbles and it kind of turns until, okay, all right, there's true north. It finds it again, right? The same thing can happen to your intuition. So let's go back to our example, John. John the lawyer. He's been a lawyer his whole life. His identity is tied up into being a lawyer and to achieving this goal of being a lawyer and being a good lawyer. Maybe at a young age, he felt a strong pull toward achievement and growth. And so he went after that. And that's what helped him to become the good lawyer that he probably is at this point. But then maybe he's been a lawyer for 10, 15, 20, 25 years. And now he's feeling differently. His inner map is reorienting. Maybe now career achievement isn't such a big deal for him because he's been there and done that. And he's looking for deeper meaning. So we have this achiever John over here, and his intuition helped pull him forward into the achievement that he was looking for. But now we have older John who wants to give back to his community, who wants to help out the young people that he sees that are struggling. That's a different identity than achievement John. Something in John has gotten tired of chasing the career ladder, has gotten tired of chasing achievement where he's been. And so he might think that his motivations disappeared. He might be blaming himself for not wanting to just continue up the ladder of being a lawyer. But his intuition is recalibrating to these different values that are now showing up inside of him. So if you're feeling disconnected from your intuition at a time like this, it doesn't mean that it's disappeared. It doesn't mean that you've lost your inner guidance. It just means that it's rewriting the coordinates. And sometimes it just needs a little time to do that. Plus, it needs for you to kind of tune in a little bit more to this future you that's trying to emerge, which can be a little hard to do because you're not that person yet. But there are pieces of you that want to be that person. So kind of leaning into that, focusing on that can help you to recalibrate your intuition a little more quickly. Okay, the second reason why your intuition may feel far off right now is that it's just too noisy in your life. And you may have experienced this. When things are noisy in your life and things are busy and things are crazy and things are stressful, intuition goes quiet. Intuition is never loud. It's never boisterous. It's never flashy. So in times of change, when things get loud, and I mean kind of in our brains, we might be getting advice from others. We're trying these pros and cons lists. We're trying to logic our way out of this situation. And then there's the cultural expectations. And then there's maybe family expectations of what we're supposed to do. And then there's our own mental chatter about maybe some of it is self-blame or some of it is worry and anxiety that we're trying to do something we shouldn't do. I mean, all these things can come up. So there's a lot of noise happening. And underneath it all, of course, we fear making the wrong choice. We usually always fear that. And so that kind of hums like an underground static. Our intuition simply can't compete with that. It doesn't shout to get our attention. It can't. So what it does is it just waits. So you can imagine standing in a crowded room, and maybe you're trying to hear a soft voice that's calling your name from across the room. You know that someone else is in the room and they're probably calling to you, so you're trying to hear it, but there's no way you can because you're in a crowded room and all the other voices are drowning out this soft voice. You can't hear it until you get everybody else to quiet down. That's what it's like trying to hear your intuition when you're going through a life transition, because it's often a season of overwhelm, which creates all this noise. A lot of people mistake that quiet for emptiness, or they think they've lost touch with their intuition. But actually, that just means that your own wisdom is just waiting for the noise to thin out. So what it's asking of you is to get to a place where you can hear it, to get to a place where things quiet down. And often that means just stepping away from your noisy life long enough to be able to be with yourself and to hear that silent voice. The third reason why your connection to intuition right now may feel blocked or non-existent is fear. So fear and intuition both speak through how we feel oftentimes. And when you're stressed, these two can almost sound identical. So let's say that John really wants to do something different. He wants to break away from being a lawyer and go help teenage kids. But he knows the second that he breaks away from being a lawyer, his income's going to tank. And maybe his family is relying on that income. Or maybe he's got kids who are going into college and are hoping that he can help pay for the college. There's all kinds of things that can come into play there. So he is afraid of doing something that's going to disappoint his family. So maybe he's trying to just, stay the course, do it for the people he loves for a while. But meanwhile, he's got this increasing restlessness, or he starts getting more irritable with what he has to do every day at the office, and things start bothering him more and more, and he starts to feel like he's a zombie walking through his life. But the whole idea of what should I do next is just unknown to him because he's in this fearful, stressful place. And the idea of doing anything different is wrapped up in fear. So he could believe that his intuition is telling him just to stay right where he is, but when that's actually fear talking. So how do we know the difference? Well, we have to get back to what sensations we're feeling inside or how the message that we're getting affects us. So, for example, fear and intuition differ in their tone. Whenever you get a fearful message, you're going to feel tighter. It tightens. That's what it does. If you get an intuitive message, it opens. It opens you. It feels like it's opening the world before you or the path in front of you. So that's one difference. Fear is tight. Intuition is open. When you're in a life transition and everything is uncertain, it's easy to confuse these two. So you might get an idea that really excites you and then say, oh, well, that's crazy. Like John, he might think, man, I'd like to go down and volunteer at the YMCA, or I'd like to go to this youth group, or I'd like to maybe start my own youth group. And then the other side of him says, oh, that's just crazy. You can't do this. And then right after that, fear comes up and says, well, what if you fail? And how are you going to earn money at that, et cetera, et cetera. And we assume that discomfort and that pushback means that we should stop. Sometimes it might mean that, depending on your life and what you're looking at. But most of the time, what it means is you're just trying to stretch yourself into unfamiliar territory. And that unfamiliar is always going to hold some fear. But if you also feel a little excitement when you think about it, or a little bit of openness, then that might be your intuition trying to override the fear. And there's one more reason that intuition may be going quiet for you. And this surprised me, for sure, as someone who likes to think through problems or think my way into the next step. I discovered that you can actually think your way out of hearing your intuition. Okay, so stay with me on this. When we lean too heavily on logic, when we analyze, replay, repeat, chart out, pros and cons, ask for advice, replaying every possible outcome, our minds get so loud that our instincts can't get a word in edgewise. Now, here's what's cool. Neuroscientists have actually found that those sudden aha moments that we get, those flashes of intuitive insight, they come from a different part of the brain than logical analysis does. And so to be able to access that, we need space, not spreadsheets, not Excel documents. Overthinking keeps us in the surface layers of the mind where logic takes place, where everything is noise and comparison and data and charts. Intuition speaks from a different place in our brains, but it can't get in there when we're so busy focused on the place where logic lives. So sometimes the harder we try to think our way through a life transition or into an answer, the further we drift from the quiet knowing that could actually guide us out. So if your intuition has been quiet, here's where we start to bring it back online. I developed a system that I call Tracecraft. It's a simple, practical way to rebuild your connection with your intuition when logic has kind of taken over. It's the foundation of everything I teach here at the Next Story Project. Tracecraft has 3 simple parts to it: catch, track, and test. Catch is where you start noticing the moments that stand out in your life. Might be a random phrase that sticks with you, might be a wild animal you see when you're out and about, might be something someone said that tends to stick with you, might be something you heard on the radio or on a podcast, might be an emotional tug towards something, a strange coincidence. These are your potential signals, and your first step is simply to catch them, to notice them. The second step in this system is to track them. This is where you record what you notice. So you don't have to worry about what it means yet necessarily, just to capture it. Jot it down in your journal or your notes app on your phone. The goal is to just get a record of several signals that are coming at you, to get a cluster of them, the ones that occur over time. So you might start catching and tracking for the next 2, 3, 4 weeks. The last part of the system is where you test. So as you're tracking these signals, you're going to start to see patterns form. Again, this is where your logical mind can get a hold of something, because we're not trying to completely bypass the logical mind. The logical mind gives us clarity, which we like. Intuition is less clear. So when we access intuition by catching our signals and tracking them, then we can then create a record that our logical minds that can then look at and say, oh, look, this is happening. I see a pattern here is directing me this way. Test is where we observe the pattern and we turn that into movement. So you take one small, low-risk action that responds to what you've noticed. A tiny experiment that lets you see if the signals or the patterns start strengthening with that movement, or if they fade or shift. Let's say that our lawyer John starts tracking all the signals that he's getting. 1 is he just feels constantly irritated at work. 2, that he finds himself going down and helping several young men at the area gym. 3, he notices a statement in a podcast that says something about how much youth are needing mentorship and guidance from adults. He starts tracking all these things. He keeps a journal, or he keeps a notes app, or he keeps anything that helps him to see all these things coming together. He starts seeing a pattern that leads him to thinking, maybe I should start some sort of group for youth that would help them. And he's just thinking about that, and suddenly he gets one more signal that confirms that. Maybe one of the parents at the gym happens to find him one day and says, you know what, you've really helped out Tom. He's talked to me about how he's been talking to you with his friends, and it really helped him out what you said the other day. He gets that one little signal. He puts it down in his journal or his notes app, and he said, oh, I'm seeing a pattern here. So then he wants to take just one small step. He just wants to test it a little bit. So the next time he goes down to the gym, he says, you know what, I'm thinking of starting this new weightlifting team. And, if you guys would like to be on it, that'd be awesome. And he just gauges their interest to see what they say. He just listens to the feedback. He just watches. If he gets any sort of a positive response, he writes that down in his tracking, and then he takes the next little tiny step. Maybe he says, well, why don't you guys give me your email? We'll talk to your parents and we'll see if we can set something like this up. This isn't the perfect example that I'm giving you here right now because I'm just trying to come up with this on the fly, but I hope you can see what I'm trying to say. That as you track the signals, you catch them, you track them, then you start taking just little tiny steps toward the pattern that they seem to be showing you. And then you get feedback. You get feedback on that step and say, okay, so is this telling me to keep going forward, or is this telling me to try another direction? This process trains us to listen and respond in real time to the signals our life is giving us, and helps us to build more clarity about the next step we need to take. So if you'd like to try this system, if you're ready to go a little deeper with this, my Signal Decoder System walks you through the full Tracecraft process, including how to interpret different signals that your life may be giving you, how to track patterns over time, and how to turn your intuition into clear direction. You'll find the link to that below. And if you'd like to start by simply recognizing the signs that your life may be asking you for a change, you can download my free Signals journal as well below. It gives you 7 common clues that a transition is already trying to happen in your life. And it gives you simple prompts to help you start making sense of what those clues may be saying to you. So we started this video by wondering why it's so hard to figure out what the next step is. Now you know it's not something that logic can solve for you. It's something your intuition has to reveal to you. So for this week's investigation, notice one small thing that is pulling for your attention in your life. Conversation, a line in a song, a sudden memory, a coincidence that feels really oddly timed. Don't analyze it, just catch it, because that's how our new chapters actually begin. And if you need more help, check out the next video coming up on the end screen, and I'll see you next time.